everyone. So this is the last video before I go back to school. And I wanted to talk about a weapon that... So I'm kind of torn on making this video, not gonna lie, because as a fantasy weapon, I love this thing. But ultimately, as a realistic weapon, it sucks. Okay? It's not a good weapon. What am I talking about? The Flail. It's basically, in real life, a deformed morning star. So, what is a flail? Well, I don't own a flail. But, Google is great. Hang on. This is a flail. Too bright. Sorry about that. How do I'm looking for dark theme. Dark mode. Can I just... I don't know. I'm not seeing dark mode. So we'll have to live with it, I guess. There's multiple different types of flail. This is a flail. Just to give you sort of an idea of what it is, it's basically a mace with a chain between the business end and the handle. That chain is the problem. Now, this being said, this one-handed flail sucks. But there is something that isn't so bad. And I'm about to go over why this is a good weapon and that isn't in a minute. So, this one, it's a lot harder to find images of. But I am talking, this is as good a picture as any. I'm talking about the pole flail. Is that focusing? No, it's not. There. I'm talking about the pole flail. So, what is the problem the one-handed flail has that the pole flail doesn't? Safety. Okay, the pole flail puts the business end way out, so it can't bounce back and hit you nearly as easily. Now, there's also the matter of controlling it. A lot of people think you can generate more force by spinning it, I've noticed. But there's a big problem with spinning something as flexible as a chain. First off, you're not spinning the chain. You're spinning the handle and that's moving the chain. You have a lot less control. And this is the best I have to show it. So, when you get spinning something so flexible really fast, it's very difficult to control. Like, I'm actually just trying to move it from side to side. And do you know why it's so difficult to control something when it's spinning that much? Well, the answer is really quite simple. It's centrifugal force. When something gets spinning, it has a certain amount of centrifugal force. When something has centrifugal force, all that force is directing it in one direction. So, when you try to change that direction while it's spinning, you're putting almost all your strength just into moving it. The only way you could really swing a flexible weapon like this is like that. And you would have to keep it moving, or the chance it will come back and hit you is even greater. And also, you see how I can do this and it's not moving the same exact way every time, even though it's the same pattern? That's another big problem. It's even harder to control with at the end of a pole. Okay? So control. Controlling it is a big, big problem. And with the one-handed flail, for some reason the chain is really long, but from what I've seen, there's hardly any bit of chain to a pole flail. Why does this matter? It's a lot less likely to come back and hit you, for one. And if there's less to spin, there's less that can go all over the place and become unpredictable. So, that's something. But you also have to keep in mind there's a very specific use I see for the pole flail that doesn't really work with the one-handed flail. So first off, the pole flail has enough distance between you and the business end of the weapon, the mace head of the weapon, that the chances it's going to come back and hit you are rather slim. But also for the purpose of hand shock. Hand shock isn't as big of a problem for an infantryman. Why would you use the pole flail if the big advantage is hand shock? Well, horseback. When you hit something going really fast with a weapon on horseback, the hand shock you're going to experience is enormous. But the chain mitigates hand shock by allowing the thing that hits your target to spin instead of all the force, all the inertia traveling up the shaft and vibrating it in your hands. This creates what is known as hand shock, which you can imagine hitting something that fast, that hard, with a solid, big weapon is going to create a lot of it. So doing it over and over, it's going to tear up your hands. So that's one advantage to the pole flail. A cavalryman can use it and mitigate hand shock. Not only is it a lot more dangerous to use the one-handed flail, especially in such a context, but it's also not long enough to be a horseback weapon. So, to give some context, I do not have much to show this with, but this is part of an old broken model sword thing. With a normal flail, you have about this much range, okay? That's not going to do so well hitting stuff from horseback. A pole flail is more like this. or even longer, even. So you're able to hit people from way further away, and it allows for horseback strengths to actually hit what you're trying to hit. And because your hand would be back here, and the business end would be way over here, the chance you're going to hit yourself is very low. Which is what I think the big reason for the pole flail being so much more common throughout history. Because it's just a more effective weapon. The one-handed flail can bounce back and hit you in the face or hit your hand. You don't want to lose your weapon hand. Okay? So, I said earlier in the video that the one-handed flail is basically a deformed morning star. So what is a morning star, specifically? Alright. This is a morning star. The brightness again. Is there a morning star anywhere on here with a darker background? I'm trying to show pictures, but it's not going so well. Oh, wow. I just found a Lego one while looking through this. This is a pretty crude wooden one, but it gives you an idea of what it is. That's a morning star. I mean, the real morning star looks different. That one was clearly solid wood. Oh, here's a makeshift pole flail. Can you see that? Can I do anything for brightness? I don't know if I can. But yeah, that's what a real morning star is. So, the flail is basically like the nunchucks are a deformed stick, which a stick is a powerful self-defense tool. A good size stick with some weight, and I just hit my recording device. A good size stick with some weight to it can strike hard. Not as hard as weapons designed to do damage, but as a self-defense tool, it works well. The nunchucks are a deformed stick. Now, the pole flail has advantages over the nunchucks too, namely having that big metal spiked business end. And some have the spike, some don't. But there's also the matter of the chain. I feel the chain would actually, if anything, reduce striking force. Okay? Not increase it. Logically, when something so flexible hits something, okay, it's going to bounce. See how this is bouncing off my hand and I'm barely swinging it? That's because it's so flexible. If I were to hit my hand with, say, something rigid, it doesn't move back unless I move it back. This is major. So that means with something rigid like the Morning Star, you can swing it and it's not just going to bounce on impact. So half your force is just going off into thin air. Now with the pole flail, because of its big advantage, this isn't as big of a problem. But you're a lot better off swinging with something rigid than something flexible like that. There's a reason the whip sword doesn't exist. Well, there's a number of reasons the whip sword was never real. But there's a number of reasons that the flail is not very common except in fantasy. Now, the pole flail has a big range advantage, and the hand shock is actually a benefit because you're not, the reduced hand shock is a benefit because you're not risking hitting yourself. Now, this hand shock issue would also be affected by what you're hitting. Say you're hitting someone in armor. You're going to experience way more hand shock by hitting the armor. Like, okay, so I don't know how many of you have ever done this, but how many of you have had to, say, really hit any rigid tool on a rigid object? Like hitting a cement wall for demo work with a sledgehammer. I doubt many have done these kinds of things, but if any of you have probably experienced what is called hand shock, which is that vibration you got in the tool when you slammed it against the wall. So that applies to combat as well. When you smack someone in armor, you're going to experience hand shock no matter what weapon you're using. But the chain would help to mitigate this, at the cost of some striking force. Now, on horseback, you can sacrifice a little bit of striking force because a weapon only has to be lethal enough. And on horseback, you're generating so much force that losing that tiny bit of striking power really isn't that big of a deal. And in turn, this increases your endurance because you're getting a lot less fatigued by the hand shock every single hit. So ultimately, a cavalryman with a pole flail could go a lot longer than a cavalryman with, say, I don't know, a claymore. However, that's not to say it's the best weapon for horseback. I mean, there are better horseback weapons. Like, the lance was prominent for a reason. Of course, the thing with the lance, it would break when you hit something with it. It was designed to break on impact. And then you would need another weapon to pull out. You'd usually have something that's at least a long sword length. You would want a war sword or a great sword if you're doing a sword. But because you have to keep in mind, the distance between you and your enemies is increased with a horse. So you want something with a decent bit of reach. Polearms have dominated the battlefield forever. And I don't know what weapons were commonly used on horseback, but the pole flail seems like it would be a top contender. Polearms seem like top contenders. I know the swordbreaker was a cavalry weapon, but it wasn't really a weapon. It was more of a defensive implement with a blade. It's a weird weapon, but the flail is not a powerful weapon, it's actually rather weak. The one-handed flail is. The pole flail has some merit. But the deformed Morningstar, I don't see it. I really, really don't. And I was not hating on nunchucks earlier either. I love nunchucks. I love the Kusarigama. I love the flail. From a fantasy point of view. As historical weapons, they're trash. And the Kusarigama, not a weapon. It was a tool. The nunchucks were a tool. And if I'm not mistaken, the flail was also a tool. That's not to say every weapon that is a tool isn't an effective weapon. In fact, a lot of effective weapons started as tools. The Tonfa were a tool, which Tonfa are actually outlawed where I live. Granted, I believe that the flail and nunchucks are too. Melee weapon restrictions are weird. Just gonna say that. They're weird. Now, you may think, but isn't the flail portable and concealable? Well, the same thing is said for the nunchucks. But I actually talked about this in my video about the stick. Okay? So, concealment versus intimidation. If you have to conceal a weapon, you're probably not supposed to have it. If you have to conceal a weapon, why are you carrying it? If you can walk around with the weapon just out in the open, I feel like that's a far more effective self-defense tool. Like, no one's going to tell you a stick, a walking stick, is not allowed. But people would say, lose the gun. Which ultimately, I do think that the stick is the best self-defense weapon. However, this thing applies to the flail and nunchucks as a concealable self-defense weapon as well. Okay? If you have to conceal it, you're not supposed to have it. Usually. So, there's also the matter that you don't want to conceal something you're using for self-defense, because the best weapon for self-defense is not a weapon at all. It's intimidation. If someone sees you walking around with a big stick and knows you're ready to just they're a lot less likely to attack you in the first place. Which, avoiding confrontation is a lot better in self-defense than being able to defend yourself in confrontation. While it's still helpful to defend yourself, the stick accomplishes both. Ultimately making it the superior weapon for self-defense as opposed to everything else, because it's a potent weapon that allows you to intimidate your opponent, and you can have it anywhere. Really. No one's going to tell you you cannot carry a walking stick. It's a fashion statement. So, yeah. That whole concealable advantage, it's not an advantage. I don't know where that started. I mean, yeah, a gun is a powerful weapon, but one, you have to conceal it. Two, you're not allowed to have it most places. Three, you gotta aim it before you can use it. But like the flail and the nunchucks, they're more concealable than a big stick, but a big stick doubles as a walking stick, which is a fashion statement. So, no one's gonna tell you you cannot carry a stick. Also, here's the thing. Let's say someone were to carry a weapon to do harm. That weapon would not be a stick. If someone were to carry a weapon to do harm, they probably know nothing about weapons. And it's probably more likely to be like a knife or a gun. Which, that's the thing. I agree with what Skolgrim said on this. If you have to ask what knife to carry for self-defense, don't. Honestly, if you're looking for a good self-defense weapon, the stick. Or a rock, even. A rock has a lot less range than a stick, but you can find those just about anywhere. But the thing with the stick is, okay, so you're walking along, you get attacked. You're ready to fight. And you're walking along, you have this big stick, you're a lot less likely to get attacked. Which, that's the thing. If you have to draw the weapon because you feel you're in danger, you could escalate the situation. So a weapon more effective for stopping the confrontation would make you more... it would make it more likely that if someone is coming for you, you're ready. Also, reach. The knife's reach is really, really bad. And you're better off using something with more reach than something that's gonna kill. Because you're not trying to do damage in a self-defense confrontation. You're trying to protect yourself. So, that's another thing. So, concealability, not an advantage. Portability. Yeah. I mean, the flail, the nunchucks, they're portable, but they're strangely outlawed in a lot of countries, and the something like the stick gives you a really quick to draw a weapon that is right there out in the open to protect yourself. Let me okay, so let's say you have a sword. back in the day, you might have a sword as a self-defense tool, which the sword is a good self-defense weapon. Back in the day it was anyways. So I'm not going to try to put this on my person or anything, but I don't want it to fall off while I'm doing this. Okay, so, which way is the blade? Alright. So, say you have a sword. Alright? And you're walking by, you get attacked. You have to... And then you have this sheath in your way there. But, like... Okay, so... Like, the katana was a specifically designed self-defense sword. So, let's take a look at that. So, you would bring the sword down, push it out a little, push it out, not pull it out. Okay? That is the Ido kata to strike. In a nutshell. It's not perfect. Now, so yeah, it's a good self-defense weapon, and the flail and nunchucks would work, but they still have the same issues they always have. But now, say you're walking by with a stick, you get attacked. Run. All that for one cut, as opposed to you're walking by, run. Someone pulls a knife on you. You can just do things like that to get them at a distance. And then when you feel that you're protected, fight's usually over by then, run. If it's not, make sure you're safe, and then jab in the nose, run. If you can, you would want to aim for the nose. And because that target is so tiny, a weapon as uncontrollable as a flail does not work as a self-defense weapon in a lot of situations. It's very situational. You're better off with a sword. Okay? A sword has way more advantages in a self-defense situation. And this blade is not sharp, so I'm not worried about cutting myself. But a sword is way more powerful in self-defense than the flail. Now, in this day and age, it's not actually legal in some places to carry a sword. There could be a lot of places like that, or there could not be, for all I know. Back in the day, everyone carried a sword. Hell, in some places, it was illegal not to carry a sword. I know that sounds weird, but back in the day, in some places, you had to carry a sword legally. And really, there wasn't a such thing as a place where you weren't allowed to carry a sword. There were often restrictions or limitations to carrying a sword back in the day, but that was the primary self-defense weapon. And it makes sense. So, the thing is, back in the day, when swords were allowed everywhere, honestly, because you wouldn't have to conceal them, and they are just a more powerful weapon overall, the sword, better self-defense weapon than a stick back in the day. But nowadays, now that the sword isn't allowed everywhere, the stick sort of triumphs. However, let's say you were trying to defend yourself back in the day. With a stick, you could hit someone, but it may not be the final blow to allow you to get away. That's the thing. The stick hits hard. It can hit hard, but ultimately the sword, which was more of a self-defense weapon than a battlefield weapon back in the day. Most swords were, with the exception of great swords and war swords. So back in the day, the stick would be better. The stick would not be as good back in the day at self-defense as the sword, because that advantage of being allowed everywhere, the sword had it too. However, there is one advantage the stick had even back then over the sword. Ow! Okay, the sword is not sharp, but the point is. Noted. The sword is a more prestigious weapon that you can't just find anywhere. Okay? A sword has to be forged. A stick, well, you're more likely to find bandits on like a forest trail back in the day than you are like in a town where there's armed guards and everything. So the sword, if you lose the one sword, that's a problem. You have no self-defense weapon. What are you going to resort to at that point? Probably a stick or a rock. Or a broom if it happens to be in a town. You're going to use whatever you can find to bop them with. But honestly, when it comes to self-defense, what do I think the best weapon is? Not intimidation, not a stick. Now, intimidation is still very powerful. It is. But the best thing you can actually have to defend yourself, agility. Because the best self-defense technique, run away. Even with a self-defense weapon, here's what you're doing. So you're walking around, you're walking by, you get attacked, boom, run. No matter what happens, what you're doing with the self-defense weapon is giving yourself an opening to run away. No matter what it is, self-defense always inevitably leads to running away. So, if you want to be as well prepared for self-defense as possible, you don't need a weapon. You really don't need a weapon to protect yourself. Something like a walking stick to make yourself less likely to be attacked is smart. But the flail is not a weapon you would use for self-defense either, because the two most important things in a self-defense situation: agility, training. I'm not talking about martial arts. I'm talking about legitimate self-defense training. If you get real training in self-defense, like dedicated training to defend yourself, you're going to be a lot better off than some dude with a sword. Now, running away will always be your primary defense. But what if you can't run away right away? Well, then you learn to fight. You get training in self-defense combat, basically. So, in short, carrying a stick, helpful. If you want to take a martial art to help you protect yourself, I'd say go for something utilizing the bow staff. Why would I say the bow staff specifically? Or Joe staff, as a matter of fact. Well, if you're attacked in your own home, who doesn't have a broom? Also, one of the best weapons for self-defense is the stick. Or you could go into a martial art that teaches you how to use a sword. Generically a sword, or maybe even a mace. So the reason these would help, probably not a sword actually, you're probably better with sticking to blunt force implements. Because if you want to be as safe as possible, carry the best weapon for self-defense you can, get a decently girthy stick. Like this stick right here, if it was a little shorter, this would be a self-defense weapon. And a powerful one. I mean, it's maneuverable. And, well, everything really. Now the other thing is, you don't have to swing a stick. You can poke with it. You can jab someone with the end, which is actually going to hit harder because the smaller surface area. Or would it have a smaller surface area? I don't know, I guess it depends on the stick. But jabbing someone with a long stick, plenty strong. Also, you can step into it. And now, some may say stepping into it is telegraphed. Ow. I just smacked myself by accident. But tell me, is this telegraphed? Okay, that was actually a bad example. How is that for telegraphing? Stepping into an attack does not telegraph it. You can do this with a swing, too. I should probably turn the other way, though. It does telegraph a tiny bit, but by the time your opponent sees that you're coming in for an attack, they can't defend. So, now I'm going to show that. I just want to talk about self-defense for a minute here to show the flail is not effective as a self-defense weapon. So, I'm going to first show the attack, and then I'm going to show it in slow motion to sort of show how much telegraphing it has. So, you're standing here. You'll probably be holding your stick right here, or maybe here. So, when you're stepping in, however, my stick has a little more mass to it. It's a little more awkward to hold it like this or this because all the head weight, so I'm going to hold it like this. Or I guess I could hold it like this. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so. See? No real telegraphing to that. So right here is about, so your opponent will probably start to see you coming about here. But then, before they can react, you're probably about here. And that's the thing. You never want to go much further than this in a strike. So if you were to do that, you get just as powerful a strike, but watch what I can do after. So you see, when I bring it back here, it takes me a minute to recover it. Haha. And that's another problem the flail has. Recovery. You never know where the ball is going to be. And even if you did, the flail has 0 defensive capacity. An axe has more defensive capacity. And the axe already is not a very good weapon at defending. Which, back in the day, the sword was the most common weapon to be attacked with. So of course, the most effective weapon to defend with is the weapon designed to defend against a sword. Literally, the sword is designed to defend against other swords. Because back in the day, that's what you would be faced with. It was more of a self-defense weapon than a battlefield weapon, but it was used as a backup weapon on the battlefield. And believe it or not, the longsword was not a battlefield weapon as much as it was a self-defense weapon, despite being a two-handed sword. So, with all this said, the pole flail has merit as a cavalry weapon. But the one-handed flail, it's all downsides. It has no advantage. The Morning Star doesn't, but it comes with a number of additional problems the Morning Star doesn't. So ultimately, why would you use a flail? Use a Morning Star. It's the same thing with less drawbacks. The other thing about using it in self-defense is why would you use an anti-armor weapon in self-defense? In self-defense, you don't need to deal with armor. You need to drop an opponent quickly with a controllable weapon and get out of there. So, even so, like, a Morning Star is still not a good self-defense tool. So, with all this said, the flail, self-defense weapon? No. The flail is not a self-defense weapon. Battlefield weapon? No. No. It's one of the weaker weapons you could possibly take onto the battlefield. Better than nunchucks. Better than nunchucks just because you're less likely to hit yourself with some flails. And you can hit a little harder with metal. Of course, there might have been metal nunchucks, I don't know. There probably was. But it doesn't really matter. The nunchucks are not a very powerful weapon. Oh yeah, that's another thing. So, with a rigid object, all the mass that is coming after your hands, all of that is going to go into your stroke. Okay? Every bit of that mass. So, that's another thing. With something like the nunchucks or the flail, all the mass making up the handle end, guess what's going to happen? Because what you're striking with is on the other end of a chain. that's what you are accelerating towards your opponent. So I don't know if this is physically how things would work, but logically, I would see that meaning less of the weapon is going into your attack, and you're not gonna hit as hard. Whereas with a rigid weapon, it's just boom, 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 boom. All these drawbacks for no advantages other weapons don't do better. The Flail, historically, horrible weapon. If you like it in fantasy, that's perfectly fine. I love the Flail as a fantasy weapon. I think it's really, really cool. I love the nunchucks too. I used Kusarigama all the time in Neo. I don't dislike these weapons from a fantasy perspective. But from a historical perspective, they're trash. And they are not originally weapons either. So, no. The Flail is a bad weapon. I don't see any real advantages to the Flail. And again, I'm trying to say this every time because I really do feel strongly about this. I feel I have logically made some good points, but honestly, I would like to know what someone from the community of the sword thinks. Okay, someone like Skullagrim, Metatron, Shadowversity, Matt from the channel I cannot pronounce. Sorry, if I tried to pronounce your channel, you would wish I didn't. Okay? I'm sorry, it does not roll off my tongue. Maybe it does for some others, but if you are seeing this, your channel is just not something I can pronounce. I'm sorry. So, with all this said, I'm going to end the video here. My next video of this sort of nature will probably be something like... So I'm planning on starting this new series where I look at weapons in video games and based on what I can see, judge would it be practical or not in real life. I will not be looking at weapons that are real, like the longsword, but I will look at weapons that aren't real. And I will be, of course, looking at them from a fantasy perspective, like acknowledging the laws governing magic and fantasy materials. But I will be looking at things like how sharp is the blade? Is there any visible extra mass on the weapon? How are its defensive capacity? Those kinds of things. I will not be judging how good a weapon it will be in real life. I will only be judging, is it practical? Would it work as a weapon in real life? Or is it impractical? That's all. So with this said, I'm going to end the video. See you all